For Doctor Who magazine issue 447, which came out in May 2012, I created the cover artwork based on one of the few things we knew about the forthcoming season opener, Asylum of the Daleks. It would feature Daleks from every era of the show. 3 months later, Lee Binding's gorgeous season promo image was released as part of the marketing campaign, and it showed a vibrant and colourful extravaganza of casings, with the most prominent designs being from the classic era. Bonus fact for you, the Dalek on the right is actually a CGI render that I supplied. Anyway, a month after that was released, fans finally sat down to watch the episode on the 1st of September 2012. And the episode didn't quite match expectations. Asylum of the Daleks did indeed feature designs from past decades of Doctor Who, and in fact there were 7 classic era props on screen. But the 21st century bronze Daleks still took centre stage, and with the set heavily fogged, the lighting low, everything sprayed with dirt, and then the final grading of the image, it was often a challenge to tell the props apart. But since Dalek spotting is in our top 3 leisure activities, and we like a challenge, there's some fun to be had trying to work out which props are which despite all the hindrances. And the most intriguing Dalek designs hiding in the gloom are those from the classic series, making them the target of this investigation. So join us in the dank recesses of the Dalek Asylum as we reveal the spooky secrets of the prison for Daleks, who are too bonkers even for Daleks. If you'd like to support our research, contribute ideas, and see clips and early videos, then check out the link in the description on how to join our Patreon. Asylum of the Daleks was the first proper Dalek story written by Stephen Moffat, after the classic Curse of Fatal Death, of course.
I'll explain later.
And the showrunner wanted it crammed with sizzling Daleks from every past era of Doctor Who. During the episode's production, a plea went out to try to gather props which might be suitable, and the story made the papers that there was a Dalek shortage. This was something of a misrepresentation of the situation, because shortage suggests a failing of the Dalek supply chain, whereas in fact the request for reinforcements was an attempt to push the boundaries and set a new record for the most props gathered for television. In reality, the production team had access to a good number of props, including those from exhibitions. However, of the 7 classic era props that were seen on screen, 3 were borrowed from further afield, each of those from a different private individual, and all with their own unique and fascinating backstory. So let's run through the episode with our fingers hovering on the pause button to examine every prop lurking in the shadows, figure out which designs originate in the 20th century incarnation of Doctor Who, and reveal exactly where they came from. As Rory recovers from his arrival, we see a room full of ominous silhouettes. There are 6 casings in this frame, but, as revealed by those diagonal chamfered top edges of the fenders, the 3 closest to the camera are new series designs, so we will ignore them for this investigation. If we take a closer look at the 2 darker silhouettes in the middle of picture, then we have our first targets for examination. The one on the left has very distinctive white mesh visible between the slats, which allows for effortless identification, especially with reference to on-set photographs which confirm exactly what we're seeing on screen. This extraordinary Dalek is one of the most accurate fan replicas ever built, and it is the work of Mark Barton Hill. It's a reproduction of one particular prop which started out in the 1960s, but then over the decades accumulated a lot of peculiar quirks, and Mark has perfectly copied how it looked by the time it appeared in Resurrection of the Daleks in 1984. The skill with which its features are replicated is extremely impressive, right down to the unique supporting blocks under the slats and the aforementioned unusual shoulder mesh. Mark's prop had been loaned to the Doctor Who experience in February 2011 for the venue's original opening at Olympia in London. and there it represented the early to mid 1980s in a timeline of Dalek designs showing how the details and colours have changed in the programme over the decades. The prop remained on display for exactly 1 year until the venue closed on the 20th of February 2012. The process then began of planning the opening of the Experience's second incarnation in Cardiff 4 months later. And as luck would have it, just as this Dalek and its fellows from the timeline became unemployed, the first domestic filming for Asylum of the Daleks was planned to take place at the end of March 2012. This provided a perfect opportunity for several props from the Experience to be used during the shooting of the TV series. But that wasn't the end for this remarkable replica. Its television career was resurrected for a cameo on Russell T Davies's Channel 4 drama It's a Sin, which saw the character of Richie, played by Ollie Alexander, get a small part in a fictitious 1988 episode of Doctor Who, which has become known as Regression of the Daleks. Mark's prop was transported over to Manchester's Granada Studios in late 2019 to appear in the 4th episode of It's a Sin, where it featured in a scene that played homage to the production design of Resurrection of the Daleks. But back to the Asylum's parade of past pepper pots, and the second one we'll look at is another borrowed casing which was never sighted at the Experience. The lack of screen presence for this particular Dalek is, in my opinion, one of the most disappointing outcomes of the way the episode was shot and edited, because despite just being a grey shape here, it started out in life as my personal favourite colour scheme. Believe it or not, this Dalek was originally the striking counter-shaded design only ever seen in the 1974 Jon Pertwee serial Death to the Daleks, set on the planet Exilon. There are some great shots of it being choreographed during rehearsals. Before it was given so much weathering, it may as well have been another grey Dalek. But how do we know that the silver and black prop seen in rehearsals is this same dark silhouette on screen? Well, the closest thing we have to taking the fingerprints of a Dalek is to look for distinctive patterns in the way that the shoulder slats are aligned. With the best will in the world, trying to get all these individual bits perfectly parallel is a nightmare. The effects department and prop builders on the TV show were usually pushed for time, and the Daleks underwent many repairs over the years which introduced a lot of quirks to the real TV props. This casing, however, is not a real TV prop, and it has not had 40-odd years of running repairs. It is a modern replica, but even with all the care taken in its construction, there are always enough unique characteristics even in brand new props to identify any specific Dalek. So by examining this photo and taking its shoulder slat fingerprint, can we coin a term for this? Slatty prints. Oh no, that's horrible. Forget I said that. Anyway, here's the unique layout of the grimy Asylum Dalek, and if we overlay the shoulders of the silver and black Death Dalek seen in rehearsals, yes, it is a match. So that evidence should prove to you that the grey shape on set is the silver and black Dalek in rehearsals, but where did it actually come from? You don't often see many Dalek replicas with this death paint job, so when I started thinking about what props it might be, I could only actually think of one place online where I'd recently seen photos of a Dalek in this style, and it was on the Classic Daleks page of the This Planet Earth website, where they have a gallery of images for each of their products, including some lovely pictures of this gleaming example. And on a hunch, as it's the only TPE Death Dalek photos I could find, we thought we'd check this one against the Asylum by taking a segment of one of these gallery photos, stretching it a bit because we don't have a perfectly corresponding angle, and overlaying it on top of one of the photos taken of the dirtied down Asylum prop. Once again, looks as if it all lines up. So, the Death Dalek on the TPE webpage is the very one used here on set. But what was its ultimate fate? After shooting of the Asylum finished, this prop, along with several others, was delivered to Mike Tucker of the model unit for refurbishment to make them ready for their inclusion in the interactive element of the new Doctor Who experience. With the components so heavily weathered, they were able to be incorporated into the ranks of bronze Daleks without anyone really noticing, and the death skirt section was fitted onto a newer fender and positioned here. To back up this assertion, so you don't just have to take my word for it, we can look at the big side panel, enhance the image slightly to bring out some of the mucky detail, pick out a few of the more distinctive shapes in the filth, and then overlay the equivalent panel as it was photographed on set in Asylum of the Daleks, and I think we can agree this is the same skirt with the same patches of dirt. As for the remainder of the casing, that too was present at the experience, with the whole of the top and the fender sandwiching a new series style skirt as captured in these behind the scenes photos. So let's jump back to 2012 and return to the Asylum and daydream about what it would have been like to get a nice view of these classic era props. But even with the weathering toned down and the lighting boosted, we're not really going to get the Technicolor extravaganza from my Doctor Who magazine cover. To commemorate this infamous artwork, you can get an A4 print signed by the artist, that's me, by clicking the link in the top corner or in the description. But let's move on. In the next shot, we are presented with a reverse angle, and despite the fact that Rory woke up and looked to his right to see the dirtied down Death Dalek, we now see the same prop slightly behind him over his left shoulder. When the action cuts back to the original view of the room, we once again see that the Death Dalek is back where it was to start with. This prop flits again a few shots later to its position behind Rory. The overhead view of the chamber shows the third of the classic Daleks that we're going to look at, and the most unusual of them for several reasons. This is the Special Weapons Dalek, and as covered in a previous episode, this is indeed the original surviving prop from 1988, albeit heavily reconditioned and with some replacement parts. For the year prior to it being called up for action in the Asylum, it too had been residing at the Olympia Doctor Who exhibition, alongside the aforementioned replica built by Mark Barton Hill. This is the only authentic Dalek from the classic era to appear on screen. The rest are replicas. In this scene, there is a brief glimpse of another Dalek of interest. As Rory switches on his torch, we can just see the edge of a mid to late 1960s style prop, and it is one which has a very interesting history indeed. But before you have time to take in what you're looking at, Rory makes a run for it. But hold on a moment. What's this? A glimpse of blue hemispheres in the background. That can only mean one thing. A second 1960s Dalek is lurking nearby. So in quick succession we have glimpsed two very early designs, just barely, but we'll get a better look at these later in the episode, so we will come back to them. Here we have that great crane shot again, and the illumination from the pyrotechnic provides a clear look at the next Dalek on our hit list, and the second representative from the Daleks' Coal Hill incident. This is a late 80s style grey renegade Dalek, built to look like one of the factions that did battle in remembrance of the Daleks. But unlike its cream and gold adversary nearby, this is not an original prop. This is really the only classic Dalek which aligns with the idea that a plea went out for Daleks from the BBC and the fans responded. Tom Nichols being the fan in question, and he was involved in a charity called Hire a Dalek, which provided the service of, you'll never believe this, hiring out Daleks. The person tasked with finding Daleks for the Asylum was art department coordinator and prop buyer Donna Shakechef, who actually appeared on screen in The Bells of St. John. Tom Nichols was used to receiving calls about Doctor Who themed events, a Doctor Who wedding or a Doctor Who children's party, so when he received a call from someone who just kept repeating that it's for Doctor Who, he was initially somewhat confused. Once all became clear, Donna asked Tom if they could borrow every Dalek that the charity had available. He said that they could, but pointed out that they'd surely have no need for the classic models, which had no business in the new series. Or so he thought. Tom and company delivered his batch of props to Cardiff, where he met Donna in person, and the Daleks were dropped off in the middle of the set for the Indian Space Agency that appeared in Dinosaurs on a Spaceship, right on the ISA logo on the floor. and it was on this set that new Dalek operators were then trained up. But where did Tom get his renegade Dalek from in the first place? He bought it from the licensed prop makers This Planet Earth, and it actually appears in photographs on their website gallery on the right here in a photo shoot, funnily enough, of Daleks and Parliament. This licensed reproduction has a proper mesh around the shoulder section rather than foam, which was dappled to create the appearance of mesh, which was the case on the original 1988 props. Acquired by the charity in early 2010, the Dalek, which was given the nickname Boris, was originally complete with all accurate appendages, specifically the correct eye stalk and sucker as seen in the Westminster photos. However, in the following months it was given a replacement for both eye and sucker, and the new parts belonged to a bronze Dalek. Hence it is pictured in some photos, such as where it was picking up a few bits here at the Prince Bishop's Shopping Centre in Durham in August 2010. But by the time of Cardiff Comic Con, which took place in February 2011, it had been given a correct 1980s style eye stalk once again. But the new series style sucker remained, and it was in this configuration that it appeared a month later in the Asylum. There were 3 other casings loaned to the production by Hire a Dalek, but they are not versions from the classic era, so they are outside the remit of this investigation. But if you hunger for more details on these borrowed Daleks, then please subscribe so you don't miss out on the forthcoming episode where we delve into the Asylum's bronze inmates. Please also do give us a like if you wouldn't mind. Skipping ahead in the episode to Amy's encounter with the Daleks, we get a much better view of the now mobile, evil Dalek. Perhaps that's confusing shorthand because they're all evil, aren't they? But what I mean is this is the design from throughout the late 60s, but with the black dome, which is specific to the Emperor's Daleks on Skaro in the serial called The Evil of the Daleks. Glad we cleared that up. As we move to a high shot, look carefully and you can see a second 60s Dalek, and in fact, since this is the same set, now doubling as Amy's location, this Dalek hasn't actually changed position since we saw that flash of blue hemispheres in the background earlier. So this is the same prop. These two 60s Daleks are a pair, which actually share the same origin and much of the same history, although one is a few years older than the other. We will start with the oldest section, which fittingly belongs to a Dalek which has been made to replicate the very first design from 1963. This prop has a remarkable history, and despite being a fan build, it has appeared in numerous official publications before it was finally canonised here on TV. It began life in 1989 in the workshop of prop builders Steve Allen and Alistair Locke, and it was commissioned by Andrew Beach. By around June of 1989, it was nearing completion, with only the mesh, slats and dome lights needed to make it a chase-style Dalek which had been ordered, at which point Doctor Who magazine came calling. Art director Steve Cook wanted to arrange a photo shoot to promote the new comic strip Nemesis of the Daleks. Steve Allen and Alistair Locke were able to offer the magazine 2 complete casings, one painted to look like the Supreme Dalek from Remembrance, and the other a light grey and black livery. But the silver and blue Dalek, which was nearing completion, actually looked pretty good in its unfinished guise. All it needed was some dome lights and it would resemble the first Dalek design from 1963. So all 3 Daleks were shipped down to South Crowborough, where they were photographed with incumbent Doctor Sylvester McCoy. The first issue to make use of the new pictures was number 152, which appeared on shelves in August 1989, and the silver 60s Dalek in question can be seen in the background. The following 3 issues each used a photo from the same shoot, concluding with number 155, on which the same 60s Dalek once again lurked in the distance. This image of Alistair Locke taken on the day shows a particular hallmark of his and Steve Allen's early builds. The collars have 4 rivets on the front band. Whilst probably not absolutely unique, they are extremely unusual, and given the scant number of Daleks around at the time, it's more than enough to keep track of it. The other notable quirk on this Dalek is that its lower collar has no rivets on it, giving the shiny surface an unusually clean look. After the shoot was done, Steve and Alistair were able to finish the build and deliver it to their customer. Due to Andrew Beech's role as an event coordinator, the Dalek then became a familiar sight at the famous Panopticon conventions. Here it is at Panopticon 10 in Coventry in 1990, showing its now completed look alongside a fetching pink Cyberman also built by Steve Allen. The Dalek now has its shoulder mesh and slats, plus white plastic lens fittings on the dome. It appeared the following year at Panopticon 11 in 1991 and again in 92 as pictured here. Also in 1992 it made its first known TV appearance alongside Rob Brydon on the magazine programme Summer Scene, which also featured an interview with Elizabeth Sladen. But 1993 was the big year for this silver Dalek. It was Doctor Who's 30th anniversary, and the prop appeared at the Blue Box convention in Bournemouth, which offers these lovely clear photos courtesy of Cedric Whiting. As well as the distinctive 4 rivets on the front of the collar, an important feature to pay attention to are those white plastic light fittings, which will be important shortly. Cedric has also provided shots of it at the Panopticon event that year, which was held at Hammersmith, where it was on display next to the original Special Weapons Dalek, plus other fan-built props. As it was a significant year for Doctor Who, Panopticon was covered by Sky News in September, where the prop was in the background here, and then again more prominently on ITV's This Morning, where Sylvester McCoy, rather disrespectfully, was leaning on it. On South Today, owner of the Dalek, Andrew Beech himself, was interviewed in front of his silver prop. The following month, it was back before the TV cameras, this time for the landmark celebratory documentary by Kevin Davis, 30 Years in the TARDIS. It was shot on the extraordinary reconstructed set of the Emperor's throne room as seen in Evil of the Daleks. Here it is in the background with those distinctive white rings on the lights, in a photo which includes Dave Bryan. Then, at some point during the next year or so, Andrew Beech requested another prop to be made in the same style as the first. There was also an opportunity for the existing silver prop to be revamped with a new, more accurate skirt, and so the old prop went back to Steve Allen, where he and Dave Bryan augmented it and created a new sibling. Here are the pair in Steve's backyard, and this is Steve. On the left you can see the trademark 4 rivets on the front, identifying the older of the 2 props, now with a new skirt section. For the second Dalek, as well as creating a more accurate collar, which stands it apart from the earlier model, the plastic rings on the new prop were black, which makes for a quick and easy way of differentiating between them. From this point on, where one Dalek went, the other would follow, and here they are at Panopticon 96, flanking the stage. Photos of this event printed in Doctor Who magazine 246 show the original Dalek with white light rims in the background here, and the one with black rims, though you can't see them, behind K9. The props were also in attendance at Longleat that year, as pictured here. The pair continued to appear at Panopticon again in the following years, in exactly the same positions as before, either side of the stage, such as here in 1997, and again in 1998. In October of 2000, the elder of the 2 props made another TV appearance, this time on the Generation game, in which contestants were asked to guess the value of a variety of supposed original props from Doctor Who. But it was the arrival of Big Finish as the official licensed continuation of Doctor Who stories that gave one of these silver Daleks another leg up on the road to stardom. On the 21st and 22nd of September 2002, cast and crew assembled at Moat Studios for the recording of Rob Shearman's acclaimed Dalek audio adventure, Jubilee. The Dalek voices were provided by Nicholas Briggs, who also co-directed and did the sound design. For the cover, digital artist and then editor of Doctor Who magazine Clayton Hickman was commissioned, and he didn't want to rely on any old stock photos or models for the Dalek element of the design. So he asked Nick Briggs to take a photo of one of the Daleks at a convention, and this was the very photo. It shows the newer of the 2 Daleks built for Andrew Beech, with the more accurate lower collar and the black rims just visible on the dome. And here it is incorporated into the finished cover, and Clayton merely tweaked the colour balance and lighting, and he also cleaned up the marks that had been present on the shaft of the arm. This CD was released in January 2003, and to promote it, Doctor Who magazine, of which Clayton was editor at the time, had a striking cover which included the other of Andrew Beech's Silver Daleks, the one with the distinctive 4 rivets on the collar. This too was a photo taken by Nicholas Briggs. Since the logo had to be positioned in the top left, the photograph was flipped, resulting in a left-handed Dalek on the cover, whereas the original photograph looked like this. So once again, the 2 props were paired together, now both cover models for their respective licensed products. Then the next chapter of their history started when, in 2010, plans were made for a new year-long Doctor Who exhibition at Olympia, London. This installation would include a Dalek timeline showing how the props had developed through the decades, and organiser Andrew Beech brought in his 2 trusty casings to help assemble the lineup. The pair were delivered to Mike Tucker and his team at the model unit in December 2010, and here is the original Dalek in the workshop before any work was undertaken, still sporting its white rims and 4 rivets. The newer silver prop with the black rims was almost a perfect replica of a mid to late 60s design, so it was decided that would be used at Olympia with relatively minor changes. Namely, it needed more accurate lights. But to give it some extra distinction, its dome was painted black.
I shall need to get the black out.
To resemble the specific design from The Evil of the Daleks. The older Dalek was, fittingly, chosen to portray the earliest type of Dalek in the timeline, as seen in The Daleks, aka The Mutants, aka Serial B, aka The Dead Planet, aka Beyond the Sun, aka Doctor Who in an Exciting Adventure with the Daleks. It would need significantly more work done, which was undertaken in early January 2011. One modification was made in order to replicate the way that the original Dalek builders, Shawcraft, constructed the very first casings. Instead of attaching the hemispheres to the outside, holes were trepanned in the fiberglass surface and hemispheres were pushed through from the inside. This not only lowers the profile of the bumps, but it also creates a subtle shadow around each hemisphere, which is a distinctive look of the early Daleks. You may not notice it, but your brain does. The unusual 4 rivets at the front were replaced by accurate attachment points, and rivets were studded around the collar too. Most notably, the slats and mesh were removed to create the cleaner look of the very first Daleks from 1963, which ironically therefore made this the second time in its history that the casing had taken on this appearance, as it once again returned to the look it had on the Doctor Who magazine cover shoot. The final touches were to give it ping-pong ball lights and a new eye stalk. And then both 60s-style Daleks were ready for public viewing. They formed up alongside the aforementioned Mark Barton Hill prop and the screen-used Special Weapons Dalek, which was only a year older than the top half of the fan replica. The pair and its associates were in London until the 20th of February 2012, when the venue closed and began the process of transfer over to Cardiff, during which window of opportunity they were available for the Asylum at the end of March 2012. The fact that this skirt section now had its hemispheres pushed through round apertures proved to be a perfect stroke of luck for the production due to a fun detail in the script. In Stephen Moffat's last big Dalek outing, the aforementioned and sadly not canonical Curse of Fatal Death, he had fun with the Dalek bumps. What do they do and why? The new series had already presented an interesting detail back in the 2005 episode Dalek, which seemed to suggest that they were part of the force field generation system, as they detached and formed a spherical energy bubble to contain the Daleks' explosion. In Asylum of the Daleks, Moffat didn't expand on their function, but he did continue the idea that they are detachable spheres, with Rory at one point referring to them as eggs, which tied into the whole strand about Oswin making soufflés. But because of the way Mike Tucker and his team had adapted this skirt, it was a simple job to remove some of the hemispheres and turn them around, in order to create the idea that they were spherical sockets from which the eggs had detached. A stroke of genius from the art department, which made the Dalek look more dilapidated than it really was. To achieve the same effect on any of the other Daleks, new holes had to be cut specially. One of the great frustrations of knowing that these 1960s style props were on set is that the script was written to deliberately spotlight them. In the intensive care scene, Oswin name-checks the particular encounters from early Dalek stories.
Spiridon, Kemble, Iridius, Vulcan, Exelon.
Kemble, Iridius and Vulcan were all mentioned, and on each of those planets the Doctor met Daleks of this design. Surely the intended moment to have one of the 60s props locked up behind bars. In fact, the earliest 60s design was even photographed here in the shooting of the intensive care scene, but no footage like this was ever used. Instead, it was decided to just use the bronze Daleks, despite the script also mentioning Exelon, which would have been the time to reveal that beautiful silver and black Dalek. And whilst the Exelon colour scheme is technically present, it is impossible to see, and in fact it's on screen again here, tucked away at the side. The last of the insane Daleks on our checklist is one of our favourites. Here in the foreground we see a unique grey Dalek. At first glance it's a standard 1970s prop, but look again and you will see that the slats on the shoulders are spaced apart more widely than usual, and the rivets are further towards the extremes of each slat. The lights on the dome are larger than usual, and it has a more basic neck section. The source of this Dalek is revealed in another of the articles that made the press. Executive producer Caroline Skinner explained that the Dalek pictured here is owned by none other than former and now returning showrunner Russell T. Davies. Since its cameo, Russell has enjoyed seeing the Dalek slowly crumble in his garden, providing precisely the kind of dishevelled look which would fit perfectly into the Asylum. When I worked for the Doctor Who figurine collection, we knew that Russell was an avid collector of our Daleks, so the idea was mooted that we could actually do a figurine of his own prop, since it had become screen used. This is the graphic that I drew up as part of the pitch, to highlight all the differences between Russell's Dalek and the usual grey ones that we had done before. Sadly, it never happened. So, accepting of the fact that they are a bit difficult to make out, how close did this story get to showing us every Dalek ever? Well, the classic series brought us about 10 notable variants, although that doesn't include 7 versions of the Supreme Dalek or the Special Weapons Dalek, and there have been lots of smaller variations of each type. But if we pare it down to say that there were silver ones in the 1960s with and without the shoulder slats, then standard glossy dark grey ones, unique Death to the Daleks colours, grey Daleks of the mid-80s, the Renegades and the Imperials, then indeed each era of the Daleks' development and each decade of the TV show is present on screen. But that's not to say it wasn't a little disappointing that we didn't see things very clearly. But of course it can be argued that it would not have been appropriate for the dismal Dalek prison to have been bursting with colour. Obviously the art department were fully committed to the Asylum's dirty decoration, and although they may have gone a little too crazy with the cobwebs, it did pave the way for the idea of resurrecting old Dalek designs, and this was revisited in The Witch's Familiar, which was indeed a riot of colour, but drove fans mad for entirely different reasons.